It's impossible to get your head around, isn't it? The intensity of the connection, the almost innate understanding of each other. But then all of a sudden, there's distance. And then comes the complete silence. And before you know it, not only are you not their soulmate, in fact, you're not even just cast aside. No, all of a sudden, they're already in another relationship. And they've moved on like you had never even existed in the first place. And that really hurts, doesn't it? Let's talk about one of the most painful questions we all torture ourselves with after the relationship with the narcissist has ended. Did they just forget me? Was I ever real to them? Did I ever matter? Or was I completely erased the moment they ghosted me and walked away as if I'd never existed? If you've ever asked yourself any of those questions or anything similar, then I want you to know something very important. These questions aren't born out of weakness, they come from confusion. They come from emotional injury because narcissistic relationships don't end normally. They end abruptly and they end coldly. And they almost always end cruelly and rarely with any kind of explanation or closure. One day you're idealized, the next you're just discarded, and you're left trying to make sense of it all. So in this video, we're going to try and answer this very question comprehensively, psychologically, emotionally, and most of all, honestly. Do narcissists completely forget you after they have discarded you? Well, the answer may well surprise you. Before we can really attempt to answer the question, we need to understand one thing. A discard is not closure. A discard doesn't allow processing on either side, and a discard is definitely not healing for the narcissist. The discard is purely their defense mechanism. When a narcissist discards somebody, it doesn't mean the bond came to a natural conclusion or that the relationship had run its course in the same way as a regular relationship breakup does. What it actually means is that you stopped serving a psychological function in the moment that they needed you to. Maybe you challenged them, maybe you yourself were vulnerable and needed their support for once, or perhaps, maybe, you just saw the emptiness behind the mask and they felt shamefully exposed. Now, in my case, it was a tiny mix of all three, but I know that I had inadvertently caused a deep narcissistic injury to her by what she had deemed was me making fun of her neediness. And in that moment, I saw every last vestige of the all-consuming darkness which was within her. The loneliness, the self-loathing, the insecurity, and the deep feelings of inadequacy despite her incredible intellect, cultural engagement, and breathtaking good looks. The irony is that in that moment, that wasn't at all how I felt about her. I was still transfixed, smitten by everything that I still thought that she was at that point. But whatever in that moment the reason is, something inside the narcissist has convinced them that you have simply stopped feeding their ego in the way that you so adeptly used to do. To a narcissist, relationships aren't built on mutual connection, they're built on regulation. That's the role that you have been assigned. You regulate their self-esteem. Through confirmation and validation, you regulate their identity. And by always being there for them, irrespective of their behavior towards you, you regulate their sense of control. And when that regulation breaks down, they don't repair the bond. Instead, they sever it. So let's not mess about. Let's answer the question directly. Do they forget you? No, they don't. A narcissist definitely does not forget you in the way that healthy people eventually forget their ex-partners. But they don't remember you in the way that you remember them either, and that's the key distinction. Narcissists don't store people as whole emotional beings. They store people as fractured emotional snapshots, as roles, as functions, as mirrors. You were remembered not as the person who you were, but as the role which you represented. So here's how memory works for narcissistic personalities. They don't integrate experiences, instead they compartmentalize them. So that means you're remembered in fragments. You're only stored in their memory for the function which you served. So you might be remembered as the person who adored me, or the person who hurt my ego. It might be that you're remembered as the person who abandoned me or the person who saw the real me. And can you see the pattern here? Every single memory of you centers around them. Not your feelings, not your tenderness, patience or understanding, not your humour, love or compassion, and most definitely not your humanity. So when a narcissist does think of you, it's not about missing you, it's solely about how you made them feel about themselves. Many survivors say the same thing. After they discarded me, it felt like I'd never existed and that the whole relationship had never even happened. Well, that feeling is real because narcissists use a psychological process called emotional deactivation. Once you're discarded, they shut off all internal emotional access to you. Not because they're healed, not because they've moved on, but because remembering you fully and in all of your authenticity would activate an overwhelming sense of shame. And the one thing that narcissists cannot tolerate is shame. So what they do instead is rewrite the story. You become deemed as crazy, recast as too much, or diminished by convincing themselves that you were never really that important in the first place. The rewriting of the story then allows them to protect their fragile identity. So do they think about you further down the line? Yes, they invariably do, and often, but sadly, not in the way that you're hoping for. They think about you when they feel rejected, when they feel insecure, when they need validation, and when they lose their current source of supply. You may in fact resurface in their mind years later, but not because they miss you as a fully rounded person or because they miss the relationship. They reminisce because they miss the potent validation and the emotional regulation that you once gave them so effortlessly. This is where, for many of us, it gets confusing and it's hard not to feel as though you're getting mixed signals. If they truly forgot us and filed all of those memories away when they discarded us, then why did they come back? Why did they text me? Why have they watched my stories or liked that old photo of mine on social media? Why did they suddenly care? Well, this is called Hoovering, and it gets its name from the household vacuum cleaner brand due to its very purpose and intent, to suck you back into the cycle of abuse. Hoovering is not remembering you, the connection, or all that you shared. It's nothing more than an inventory check of their belongings. They're checking to see if you're still available. They're testing the waters to see if you are still reactive to their manipulation. And they're checking to see if they can still gain access to your emotional energy. A narcissistic Hoover is not about reconnection, it's about reassurance. Reassurance that you're still tied to them. Reassurance that they still matter. That feeds their ego and makes them feel important, and reaffirms that they still have control over you. Here's what's important to understand. If the narcissist finally remembers what you gave them enough to actually reach out, then it's vitally important that you're crystal clear about exactly what they don't remember. They don't remember all of the sacrifices you made when you were together. How you constantly prioritized their emotional wants and needs ahead of your own. They don't remember your loyalty and your commitment to them, or your total investment in them. They don't remember your tireless emotional labor, how you constantly absorbed angry outbursts and how you were always there, willing and obedient at the end of one of their silent treatments. They didn't appreciate that it was you who carried the entire burden of the relationship when they were with you, so they're certainly not going to give you credit for it or remember it after you have been discarded. And they definitely don't remember your pain and suffering at their hands when they pulled away and ghosted you like you had never shared any kind of meaningful connection at all, on any level, much less than that of the soulmate that they told you that you were. Because acknowledging any one of those things would require empathy, and empathy threatens their incredibly fragile self-image. So if you've been discarded relatively recently, you're probably thinking that you've never known pain, confusion, or suffering like it. Well, let's examine why the brutal discard leaves you as broken as it does. It's because you're grieving someone who is still alive, and worse still, someone who moved on in a way that superficially appears completely effortless, like you had never even meant anything to them in the first place. Their complete disappearance without warning or explanation deliberately creates a wound called ambiguous loss, where there's no closure, no discussion or accountability, and absolutely no mutual recognition. There's just unending silence, a void where resolution should be, loose ends that your brain and cognitive function desperately need tying off in order to be able to move on with your life. What makes it fundamentally so damaging to us is that it's not just about the relationship being over, it's about the complete reframing of everything that it ever appeared to be. So you're not just dealing with rejection, you're dealing with confusion and feelings of shame and foolishness that you've been duped, scammed, and lied to all along. You're not just mourning the loss of a person, you're grieving the loss of the reality of the entire relationship, as well as the time that you wasted on something that was little more than a game to them. You were haunted by precious memories which you shared, and you will tell yourself that they can't all have been fake. Yet, at the same time, once you understand the truth, it's impossible to believe that it was anything other than a manipulative pantomime. Your cognitive dissonance will go through the roof because you'll constantly be replaying events and moments and conversations which your logic and reason tells you were all fake, but your heart still feels that they were real. Because for you, they were. And you don't recover from this in a matter of days or even weeks. Here's the thing that you really need to know right now. Whether they remember you in the way that you would like them to or not has absolutely nothing to do with your worth or value. You were not forgettable. You were just too real for someone whose very survival is completely built on illusion. Narcissists don't forget people who matter, and they definitely don't forget people who served and supplied them well. They avoid remembering them as fully rounded individuals because those people threaten their full self. They serve as a constant reminder of everything that the narcissist can never be. Healing won't ever come from being remembered by your abuser. It only comes from remembering yourself and gaining clarity and insight into just how much of yourself you lost catering to their needs within a toxic relationship. And a relationship that's very dynamic was designed to keep you trapped, manipulated, and bonded to someone who needed your constant validation in order to survive. Healing will come from reclaiming the parts of you that were minimized, invalidated, and diminished, all in an effort to prop up their desperately fragile ego. It can only come when you really understand that the discard was not a reflection of your lack of value, it was an indictment of theirs, and was purely a reflection of their emotional limitations. So do narcissists forget you after discarding you? No, they most definitely do not. But they don't remember you in a way that will ever bring you accountability, repair, or love. And however much it feels like it right now, in this very moment, that's not a loss of anything even remotely precious. I hope that this video has been of some use and maybe even answered your question of whether a narcissist thinks about you or forgets you completely after they have discarded you. It's only natural to think about this almost obsessively when you were conditioned over a period of time with hot and cold treatments to need to be attached to them, despite the fact that at the very same time they were working constantly to keep you at arm's length. If you have found it useful, then please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And I'd love it if you felt comfortable enough to leave a comment down below, sharing your own thoughts or experiences of narcissistic relationships. And I'd particularly like to hear your take on whether you think narcissists think about you after they've abandoned you and moved on to a new supply. Be kind to yourself and remember, together we will get through this.